Morning team, Macho Models here with the X29 build. So as you can see, I'm getting ready to do my resin pour, and I just wanted to kind of show everyone what I've been working up to. So I built this box, and I'll talk to this in a little bit because I resin carry, but I wanted to talk to the resin before I actually poured it. So I'm just using this AK stuff. I'm sure probably in retrospect I should have just gone to the art store and picked up something, you know, a little bit more generic, but I was at a con and I bought that, and life is good. And I actually use my paint cups to go ahead and mix this, and it looks like that's going to be enough mixture. I'm definitely going to pour this, and I'll show y'all what this translates to on this 3x5 base. But what you're looking at, so it's 2 to 1, so I put 2 parts resin and then 1 part hardening agent. And I just measured up to 20 milliliters for the first one, and then I put 10 milliliters in here. And then the next piece is the mixture here. So I'm just working with some Tamiya colors. I've got XF8 and XF67, and I mixed mostly green and blue. And I'll go ahead and cut here so I can get a little bit closer to show you guys what this color looks like. So this is about, call it 4 to 5 tiny drops of the blue, and by tiny drops I mean I would just dip my toothpick in, and then as that kind of fell off, I'd use that as a drop. You want to use it really sparingly. That being said, I did want somewhat of a darker base here. I added 1 cup, little drop of green, just to kind of do a blue-green sea effect. And I spent a good while mixing this. So just some kind of lessons learned working with glues and these other kind of like hardening substrates is you want to mix really efficiently. I'm talking like I probably spent maybe 3 minutes just mixing this up. It not having a thorough mixture is a bad recipe. So do a little bit investment, do a little bit of work up front, and make sure you get this mixture right. And before I go ahead and drop this into the base and probably dork it up, I'll talk to kind of the here and why and the how and why about why I set this up. So I just used some gator board, foam core board that I had in the back, some scraps that I picked up actually from my dad. And I measured out a smaller base, and as some of you guys may or may not have heard, I always try to default to a smaller base versus a bigger base. So, you know, this covers, I'm sorry, I'm pointing over the X29, you guys can't see it. This covers a smaller portion of the X29, so this goes to about to where the canopy is, to maybe where the vertical stabilizer is. So it's not a huge footprint. The other piece was, you can kind of see how I cut these pegs. I want the nose high, I want the left wing a little bit higher, and I want the right wing down so the aircraft's kind of banked. I have a pour line of about 1 inch, and you can see I marked that out, but I marked it out from the ground up, so in reality it'll probably be 5/8 of an inch. And then each of these little stanchions is just super glued. I'm kind of okay with them. They're not perfectly 90, you know, but I'm not too concerned with it. I think it'll be okay. And I'm going to drop the resin in, and I'm hoping that it gets to at least a little bit under half. I'm really not sure how 30 milliliters is going to translate 3x5. I'm sure I could have done the math and figured it out, but hey, as you guys know, I'm lazy. And then the other finishing pieces, after the resin dries and everything, you know, I'll pull this apart, I'll sand it, but I probably want to get something here to add a little grip. So I was thinking I can either use my hot glue gun, which is what I use to secure this and many of the edges, or maybe there's like a little, you know, like cell phone stand digit that I can put on here, like a little rubber, how you doing, that'll hold it in place. And yeah, this is my little box. Oh, one other thing. So you can see I did most of this with hot glue, and then I actually went back and I just filled a couple more seams with super glue. So I just used my Gorilla Glue, and you can see where I use my baking soda just to get an instant cure. And the thinking was I didn't want any of the resin to bleed through there, and it just is potentially going to save me some sanding. So I'll cut and I'll go ahead and pour it. I'll come back and I'll show you guys how it turned out. All right, so I poured a mere seconds ago, and what do you know, it looks like shit. I think kind of just assessing what happened was these little cups that I'm using. Let me go ahead and just pull back for you guys. They don't, I filled it up to the brim, and as you can see, there's blue paint around the rim, and I noticed as I was really stirring thoroughly that a lot of the pigment was getting caught on the top of the surface, and I'm guessing that if I'd used a little bit taller of a cup and, you know, and really made sure to get the edges, I probably wouldn't have had this, like, you know, tie-dye effect inside here with the paint. I'm also kind of disappointed too on how low that level is. So as you can see, you know, it barely covers the bottom, and you know, a lot of this paper is also going to pull this up. So I'm going to try to reassess. I actually have some painter's cups, which are dramatically larger. Like I think they're almost, half a quart. So, in retrospect, I wish I kind of had something a little bit in between, maybe like a 60 milliliter or 100 milliliter cup to mix and pour for a base like this. But I've got about 5 minutes left on my 5 a.m. build before I need to transition and get off. So I'll let this set, but for tomorrow I'm probably going to use a larger paint cup, a taller paint cup, and I'm going to try to mix. So this is a 30 milliliter batch. I'll probably try to mix a 100 milliliter or maybe a 60 milliliter if I'm feeling conservative. I don't want to spend too many days pouring this. I really the X29 build's kind of drug out, and I just kind of want to knock it out at this point. And now that the resin's in there, I'm not going to mess with that. I probably an earlier me would have gone and like added paint and tried to mix it, but you know what? I'm just going to leave it. Worst case scenario, when this thing comes out, if the paint is really, really janky, I'll just go ahead and paint the edges. I'll just go ahead and paint the entire resin block, or try to figure out some way to visually make it look a little bit better. But for the time being, I'm just going to let it set, because this is the first time I've done it, and I'm way cool with making mistakes, making errors, learning, growing, all that fun stuff. All right, y'all, it is the next day, and this is my resin. A lot of it actually bled through, so I watched it untested. It seemed to have worked on the video just fine, but it came through. It doesn't look too bad. Actually, maybe these are kind of thick. So, needless to say, this is hard, but this looks like crud. And like I talked to in the previous video, I think it's because of the smaller cup I was working, and a lot of the paint had pulled around the rim, and as a result, I think that's why I got the tie-dye base. So my theory this morning is I'm actually going to take this paint and mix it better. Yesterday when I dabbed it in, admittedly, I just cracked the cap, and then I took my toothpick and I just kind of pulled it out. This mixture, it's kind of hard to see. Let's see. It's pretty good. Usually when I'm painting, I will actually put it through with a drink mixer, and it's almost at that consistency, but not quite. So I'm hoping mixing it will work a little bit better. I'm also going to use this larger HDX cup. I'm not nearly going to fill this up. Yesterday this was about 30 milliliters. So my rough math, I think I'm going to try to shoot for about 150 milliliters of resin to pour to hopefully get to that 1-inch fill line. But TBD, I'll cut back and we'll see how it goes. All right, so we have a, we'll call this mildly successful pour. It looks good. It's, I'm actually a little worried now that I'm looking at it, how this thing's gonna level out. Like, one of the reasons that I built this box and I sanded the edges was that I was hoping to get this thing level, but I'm not too worried about it. I might play around with it a little bit, put some coins underneath here to get these edges level, but to be honest, I don't even know if the lines I drew are level, but it's all good. So the trick here was mixing it in a larger cup definitely helped. Used a popsicle stick this time, and you can still see that there's still some pigment rimmed, but it's not nearly as bad as it was on the smaller 30 milliliter cup. So just using a larger mixing cup. Another thing too I'd probably attribute to this is opacity. So you can see this is pretty dark, and I mixed again just the flat blue and the NATO green to just kind of get a sea green. So I mixed enough to the point where it's clearly not opaque anymore, and I'm okay with that. I wanted like a solid color block anyways. So it's a little bit more paint and then a bigger mixing cup, and I think I got better results, but TBD. Another thing too, I was right, I burned through these AK Interactive bottles. So they're good for, call it like about a 200 milliliter pour, maybe a little bit less. And yeah, the AK stuff's great, but you're paying a premium for, just a little bit of chemistry, or I should say packaging. I'm probably going to go with like an art store stuff for my next pour. I'm imagining you can get these like huge tubs of that stuff for not much money, and it should last a while. So once this dries, I'm going to pop this off, and that's probably going to be the next nightmare. I'm imagining a lot of this foam core is going to be left behind. Again, I'm going off this like Adam Savage tested video. I didn't really do like a ton of research. Probably using like styrene sheets may have been a better choice, but we'll find out. I'm expecting it all to come off pretty violently, and when it does, I'm going to come back with some sanding implements to get after it. So I've got some sanding blocks, and then I've got my workbench in the back where I've got a vise that I can put it into, and I might even use a palm sander to clean this thing up. Depending on how that stuff goes too, I might sand it enough to where it gets really glossy. Like ideally, kind of, I'm imagining this type of texture on the sides, but I want to see how much work it's going to be. If it's like a morning or two, I'm good. But you know, after like 30 minutes of sanding, if it doesn't look like it's going my way, I'm probably just gonna bail on it and maybe take some styrene sheets to edge it. But ideally, I'd like to present the X29 on a clear block, and then I've got some other kind of cool fun stuff to show you on how I'm going to dress up the top here. Morning team, Macho Models with a rare look at Workbench B. So here we are. I have, this is actually the same base, if you can tell. I took a chisel to get the bottom side of the foam core off. So it took a little bit of work, but it wasn't too bad. And I've got a 100 grit piece of sandpaper on my palm sander, and you can see all the leftover goodness right there. So this looks pretty good. I'm going to, this morning, get after the edges. This is just the flat base. I'm going to leave this matte, but the edges I want to be able to hit with 100 grit sandpaper, and then I'm going to try to go up to maybe 1500 or 3000, maybe do some wet sanding. Ideally, I'd like the edges to be glossy and shiny. How achievable that is, I have no idea, but I'm going to give it a go. So I'll report back and show you guys in an hour and some change how it all looks. All right, y'all, the resin is polished up and it's looking pretty good. So for those of you guys who are curious, I cut to, prior to this, I showed you my Workbench B. And it's pretty simple how I got here. So I took a palm sander and I started with 100 grit, and that was enough to blast off most of the remaining foam core. Where there was kind of stubborn bits, I took a chisel and I just kind of like lightly went along the surface. And on the bottom you can see where it's still kind of like unrefined. This is just 100 grit sandpaper. But on the sides and on the top, especially on the sides, I took the palm sander and did 100 grit and got it nice and level and blasted off a majority of the bits. I then came back with 220 with a palm sander, and then from there, I think I did one more 400 with a palm sander, or maybe I started by hand at 400. I'm sorry, I can't remember, but definitely by 800, I started wet sanding. So I just took a little piece off. I went to my work sink and I ran this thing underwater along with the sandpaper, and I started to sand. And that's where the magic really started to happen, where you know, you saw most of the goo get blasted off, and then this really nice soft satin finish started to come through, and I think it looks pretty solid. One kind of thing I noticed, and it might be a little hard to show up on camera, is this top edge. Actually, you can see it on camera, it looks like garbage. I didn't measure the box out as correctly, which was such a missed opportunity, because I have, I'm trying to reach, I have these little MadWorks, little T-squares, so I should have taken a little bit more time to make sure that all those corners are square on that box before I poured it, because it's kind of off. I also too, I don't know if you noticed when I was showing this, I set this up offset, so I kind of imagine, you know, a little bit more forward motion for the jet, but kind of the more I look at it, I don't know if I like the offset, but I'm okay with it. I'm just gonna blast through and just keep going, and I'm still having fun. So the next phase is I'm gonna try to polish some of this stuff out. The edges look pretty good. I want to see how much of it I can recover with some automotive compound. So, you know, shocker, I like detailing cars too. And I love the chemical guy stuff. So I have V36, which is kind of like a middle of the road compound polish. And then I've got butter wet wax. So I'm going to hit the whole thing with some compound polish and then some butter wet wax. And the reason I'm doing that is, for those of you guys who kind of saw the vision, or I shared out the link, and I'll certainly put it when I do the build vlog, I'm going to, I base this a lot off of this Adam Savage project, where two of their builders made these really cool water diodes. And the next phase is to take this clear caulk material and to put it on here and kind of move it around to make it look like waves. And then once that's dry, then I'm going to mix up a dry brushing formula using this waterproof clear silicone that dries in like 45 seconds. This stuff takes like a day to dry. So needless to say, when I put this down, I was like, well, I'm not going to see the top of the surface, so why don't I just put this down? But then I was like, I don't know. I don't want, if this dries clear and this shows through, I'm going to be kind of bummed. So I want to see how much of this I can recover it. And polishing compounds actually do some pretty amazing work. They have enough grit in them, similar to a sandpaper. So we'll see. Or maybe I'll have to come back and sand this a little bit more. So we left off, I polished the block, and I still got the compounds and all that jazz back there, and then I just went ahead and taped off the edges. And then I came in with this Dynaflex 230 clear. I don't think this really matters. I just went for the cheapest one. I went for, I think this is like interior, exterior. I didn't use the bath and tile one, and I want clear. I also have this tool. I can't remember where I got this from. I think I got it from an art shop, but it's just for like shaping and modeling clay. And what I did was I put a couple dabs down and I started to kind of smear it, but I didn't like the appearance. So then I just kind of really lightly just started dabbing this. And I really like this. This looks pretty good. Admittedly, for the scale that I'm going, it probably doesn't match up. So 172 versus this looks like if you pulled back from like 10, 20,000 feet and looked down at the ocean, it might look like this, right? But up closer, I don't think it would probably have the same effect. But I'm okay with it. I think it looks keen and I'm into it. So coming back to the application, I just dabbed it over, and then taking this tool, I just really lightly went here and just kind of ever so slightly push it around to where I thought I would like it. And I like it. It looks good. Mind you, all of this looks white, but in 24 to 48 hours, it'll be nice and clear. All right, y'all. So here is the base after the compound dried. So it looks cool. It's I thought it'd be a little bit more built up in some sections, like in here. I remember it being a little bit higher, but I think it looks perfectly fine. I have zero beef with how this turned out. But yeah, this is great. It looks good. I'm actually just waiting for my hot glue gun to heat up. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put some hot glue on here and just kind of shape it so that when I put the X29 down, it has something rubbery to bite into versus this hard plastic. And then once that's done, I am going to transition into my dry brushing, and then we're going to call it, man. I'm super excited to wrap this up here this morning. On the Tusted video, they made this pretty good argument about how you want to mix clear silicone with your oil paint, because when the oil paint touches this piece, it's not going to bind really well, and supposedly silica paint is very expensive. So they said you can make your own using this waterproof sealant. I didn't use the exact one from the show. I got a similar one, and the difference between this sealant and the one that I used to make the waves, the base, is that the base takes about 24 hours to dry. This takes something like 45 seconds. So that being said, I mixed the two together and I really didn't like the result. Like, as you can kind of see on my palette here, sorry about my Q-tip, put that over there. It dried really quickly and it got really like crusty. And as a result, when I was doing my dry brushing over here, it was pulling up and there's all these little bits and bobs. So I kind of was like, dang it, I screwed it up. But then I just remembered, hey, I could just go ahead and take some odorless thinner and do some dry brushing of my own to pull it back, and it worked out fine. It actually kind of created a little bit of a mud effect, but looking at it on camera, it looks perfectly good. So coming back to my palette, I ended up just putting some white back on here and then coming with a different brush. So this is the one that I used with the sealant. As you can see, it got like really, let me pull the light over here. It got really, really crusty really fast, and all those little pieces were falling in between the waves, and I did not like how that looked. So I just went with the oil on my little cardboard palette here and did some dry brushing, and I think it looks pretty good. This looks a lot better on camera. I'm curious when I pull this into the computer or the larger screen what it's going to look like, but looking at it in person, it looks kind of flat. Like, there's not a lot of contrast, but looking at it on camera, it looks a bit better. And the other piece was, when I was working on this, I had it up and I was working it from a ton of different angles, because the specularity, when you're taking a look at this, it's really hard to kind of see where the differences are. So when I was doing dry brushing, I kind of felt like I was doing the Ben & Jerry's thing where I'm putting too much flavor into it. But I picked it up and I spun it around to kind of get a better look, and I felt better about it. So with regards to dry brushing for this type of work, I initially started to kind of go in a singular motion, which looked okay. But one of the regrets that I have with this project is that I kind of killed my lows, right? So by dragging the brush across, I kind of made everything even. Versus what I started to do towards the end, which was I actually just started to stipple on the peaks like such, and I really like how this result looks like. And as I kind of turn this around for you guys on camera, you can see I think it looks a heck of a lot better. So whenever you're doing your dry brushing with oils, or in this instance, I would just stipple versus the dragging motion. The dragging motion, again, killed a lot of these great low areas. But hey, I'm okay with it. And again, I think it looks good on camera, so this is probably just my eyes picking things up. All right, so that's it for the X29 base. I really appreciate you guys following along and keeping up with this project. Unfortunately, I'm not going to let you see the completed piece. I'm going to go ahead and pull everything together into a single wrap-up video. But it's been fun. I'm really excited, as you can see, to put this project down. And I've been working on it for the better part of 4 months, prior to when Frank was born. So I'm pretty excited to get this thing wrapped up this week and then move it on to my next project. Thanks for following along, and if you like this video, please leave a like, subscribe, do all the things. I also want to plug my Patreon. I've got a phenomenal community of people that support me over there, and if you like how this video went, if you like how this series went, and you want to throw a little something in the change jar, I really appreciate it. And plus you get a cool t-shirt, stickers, all that fun jazz. But links are below in the description, and thanks for watching, and of course whatever you guys are getting after, be sure you make it macho.